So welcome, 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 our brilliant colleague Alexa. We so appreciate your consistent visionary leadership and solidarity. And as always at Setsi, we begin all things by giving thanks to the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We give thanks to all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We give thanks to all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So Alexa, can you please share a bit about your remarkable work with our listeners and our viewers?
Thanks so much for having me, Victor. Well, I'm joining here from North Burnaby in the Metro Vancouver area, the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Squamish nations, among many others that have were worked in collaboration and passed through. And I think, when we talk about my work and talk about community building, I think one of the things that really is about me is I just came off a conference and a health sector conference where I'm very new to the healthcare sector. And what struck me is we get in these mindsets where we're using the words to talk about organizations and systems as if they're living beings, right? Like we talk about the Ministry of Health or the XY organization or this. And sometimes we have a bit of disdain in how we're talking about these like big organizations that seem hard to move. And it's just such a great reminder what those it's a facade, the ministry of something, something, the big organization. It's all about the humans that make up those organizations, right? And so I think that's the reminder. If you think about the thousands of years of people moving over these territories, they didn't have, the boundaries. They had to, obviously it wasn't always roses and salmon, I guess, in the West Coast here, right? Like there was hardship for sure and conversations, but there was a more of a porous movement and conversation. And so I think that's sort of where I start this conversation. I guess it must be Friday morning reflections. I'm in a more reflective place, but just I think that's the work that really has driven my work. Is I've always just thought it's about the humans that are behind a desk, behind a commuter, and just not being afraid to reach out and connect and have a conversation and remember that there's much more in common with that human that is behind the facade of some big organization or system than there are differences.
I
That's
couldn't
probably
agree.
not what you're expecting.
Well, this is exactly what I was expecting, authenticity and leadership. So thank you. I really appreciate that. And I always say relational infrastructure is what moves things. It's not logos, it's not buildings, it's people and relationships. So once again, I appreciate your candor and leadership. So my next question is, what's inspiring you right now in your work? What has you curious or what's keeping you up at nights?
That's a great question. Well, I've just come through a transition. So my career path has been very nonlinear, and I've sort of defied, I guess, sectorial boundaries. I spent 15 years at the federal government in Canada in 6 different departments and agencies around Canada, working in, the arts and heritage, in fisheries and oceans, environmental assessment, such different places. Um, and then from there, I did an MBA in sustainable systems. And for the last probably 10 to 15 years, I've been in the space that where the lines between nonprofit, for-profit, social enterprise, social impact are blurred, and it's a fun place to be. And I think it's a familiar place for you, right? It's sort of, yeah. So I think, I've spent the last 4 years working for a fantastic entrepreneurial nonprofit called Fresh Roots Urban Farm Society, which was the first of its kind in Canada to grow farms on schoolyards and engage with thousands of youth and kids every year, and work from a much more sort of ground, like hands in the soil to table way of engaging with kids and youth around food security, around health and wellness, around community connection, and around just getting outside of traditional indoor road seated classrooms where learning, really comes to life for so many kids. I mean, we say the kids that struggle, but honestly, we all do much better and we all have so much to learn from just getting into the soil together and, doing math, science, language arts on the farm. So, and then I've just transitioned into a very new role. So I'm in this place of transition. I'm working with an organization called BC Family Doctors, which is in the healthcare sector here in British Columbia. And, as many of us know, our healthcare system is being really stretched and is under a lot of strain, not just in British Columbia, but across Canada. Um, what our families and the patients are experiencing and also expect have like have just monumentally changed in the last 40 years. um, on the side we have some very strange ways of organizing our healthcare system that haven't really kept up with the changes. um, so it's an interesting time for me to dive in with sort of a beginner's mind, learning a new sector, but also healthcare. I mean, none of us go untouched by the healthcare system. And I think what's keeping me up is I've sort of, I mean, I won't say I'll come full circle, but I started my career in the federal government, which, coming from small town Alberta, landing in Ottawa, I felt, I remember taking the elevator up to work my first morning. I'm fresh out of university, undergrad, and just kind of overwhelmed by all these people in one city deciding on policy and programs impacting a country as diverse and you know spread apart as Canada. And I think that's sort of a bit what I'm keeping me up right now is um, there's a lot of government involved in healthcare. It's the biggest Ministry of Health in BC is the 37% of the provincial budget goes into healthcare. So, how do you find the humanness and make change when the system for the people inside it and the people beyond it seems so daunting?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate one, you sharing that journey, because what an incredible journey in terms of your work, and social impact in general, but as well all that context that you provide. That there's such richness in conversations, and once again, I just really appreciate all that you shared. And it's a perfect segue to my next question, which may not be the same as the last one, but like, what challenges and barriers do you face in your work, and what are some of the approaches you're taking to overcome some of these challenges and barriers?
Yeah, I think maybe I'll start by saying I think where I've become a little bit specialized in sort of my roles is, and that's why I've landed at BC Family Doctors, which is basically a membership-driven organization. We represent um, uh, the family doctors across the province, and so it's membership funded. And also, we're the voice of family doctors in for change. And one thing that's very familiar about this team is that it's a small team. We have, a 4-person staff team um, that supports it. We have about 3 to 4 thousand members across British Columbia, and it's a team that's like really making some interesting change. So there's innovation and creativity in this small and nimble team, and that's sort of where I've roots and very similar to the teams in the past that I've worked with. And um, the challenge is that one, there's resource challenges, but two, it's sort of how do you again navigate and find the right people to have the conversations with that's going to open a door. And I think for me the biggest challenge is disrupting our entrenched ways of thinking and doing. And I think this also speaks to when we speak around about, what is needed, what is the work required for anti-racist, anti-oppressive, like decolonized societies. It's like we are all programmed in many ways, and we can't even see the programming. I've worked with many teams where, a great example, the culture of overwork in the nonprofit is, very familiar. Um, and I've worked with teams that even when we explicitly say this is not what we want. Even when the leadership is saying, you don't have to respond to that at 3 o'clock in the morning. Don't have to do, like, even when there's sometimes something inside us, and this is what I've had many discussions with my staff teams and colleagues that says, we have to keep going. You have to keep doing that, sort of like keep keep reacting, keep taking action. And it really is a relearning and a repatterning that is required to know when it's more powerful to not react and to not act sometimes. And even when I say that, I can feel it in my body. Ooh, there's so many things that you have to take action against, right? Or like speak out for. But there's power in the listening and taking some time. And yeah, so I guess that it is the challenge of, and that's very uncomfortable for people. People want to feel efficient, they want to feel productive, they want to feel they're doing. But I really strongly believe that we're going to have to let go of some of that in order to really see what we can open up and what can emerge in its place.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I remember being in my 20s and literally feeling like a robot. Like when I think back on it, it's like there's almost like a sense of identity around efficacy and functionality and just that consistent having to do more and do more and do more, almost wearing busy like a badge of honor. And recognizing that
Mhm.
as you get older and your body starts to betray you, it's like you have to put your phone on airplane mode at a very specific time at night, or you'll never get any sleep. Like you have to take your phone off airplane mode in the morning. You have to know, okay, this is when I'm going to touch the laptop. This is when I'm not going to touch the laptop. These are some of the supports I need to put in place to
Yeah.
navigate my day and my work and my scope of so yeah, I think that the universe and our bodies force us to take action in a different way
Yeah.
by doing that repatterning and relearning. And I always pray that my colleagues that are the busiest, because they always say, if you want to get something done, give it to the busiest people because they'll get it done. I always pray that my colleagues that are the busiest, that I always try and check on the most, um, don't let their bodies betray them to the point where they're forced to change their ways, where it's a gradual process because far too many have been forced to change those patterns and proclivities.
Mhm.
So perfect segue to my next question. Do
Mhm.
you have a set of key priorities right now in your work?
I like to speak about like concrete examples when I'm listening to people. I always feel I appreciate the real stories. So maybe I've been asked by the board that I work with, the board of BC Family Doctors, strategic planning is a priority for this coming year. And we're in a new leadership structure. So my esteemed colleague, Dr. Renee Fernandez, has moved into the role of Chief Medical Officer. And so I'm actually the first executive director at BC Family Doctors that is a non-physician. So it's quite a shift for physicians, and it's fantastic because she's so excited. She gets to do the things that she loves and she is like absolute expert in. I get to come in and do the things that I've been trained to do and have experience in doing. But I always, and I'll share this very vulnerably. I just for about a decade, I've been exploring and developing. Um, I don't want to say new or different because that's not the word. It just doesn't quite. I would say I've been resisting doing strategic planning processes in the ways that are familiar and that have been done and that people expect. Um, I just find in business and in nonprofits and organizations, there's these things that we think we have to do, and that we also are sometimes, um, we think they have to look and feel a certain way, and it becomes a checklist. And I think, and I offer the strategic planning example as an example of opportunities for all of us to be more discerning in how we're going about doing our work. The same can be for business planning, right? Like, why am I doing this? And what is the mindset and even the paradigm that I'm bringing to this work? And what are we aiming to create with this group of people? And it's definitely not a polished document that we get to be excited about on social media or print and then never nobody reads. So to me, it's really about the process, and really about the process of engaging with the group of, in this case, the board and the staff of BC Family Doctors, that, and asking those like, what is the unique contribution that this organization is being called to make at this moment in time? What is the role that is uniquely ours that shows up time and again that we get called to do, and go there as opposed to kind of hearing things and saying, how do we fix that? How do we solve that problem? I really resist the problem solution hamster wheel. I think it's gotten us into a lot of trouble. And I try to remind myself of Einstein's quote, that we cannot solve the problems of today using the same mind that got us into this. So I'm not sure if I quite answered it, but
You more than answered it. Once again, there's such richness in the conversation. I love the way you frame it's about the process and ideally the practical application of these things, and folks feeling positive and happy to be able to go on that journey
Mhm.
of um, uniqueness. And I think that that problem and solution hamster wheel that you mentioned, sometimes people feel that we have to respond and be responsive. But I think once again, as you mentioned in terms of Einstein's quotes, like, well, there needs to be a renewal of our mindsets and a shift in terms of patterns and proclivities to actually have impact, or else we're just once again it's a hamster wheel, or you're chasing your tail. So I really loved all those actionable insights that you shared, because there are so many organizations going through strategic planning processes as we speak right now, I'm sure, and folks trying to build business plans
Yeah.
from that problem solution mindset, not
Yeah.
recognizing that one, these
Mhm.
problems are pervasive and cyclical,
Mhm.
and two, you can't deconstruct things using the same tools as the past. So I really appreciate your candor and authenticity, really do. So my next question is,
Thanks.
what is your ultimate goal, and what does success look like and feel like to you and your colleagues?
Well, that's an interesting one again for a Friday morning because I really see myself as sort of a nested change maker within an organization, within a system, sort of that three levels, those circles, those concentric rings. And so so I'm always thinking sort of why am I here at this moment? So what's my highest use? A lot of the work I do is really focused on, uh, transitions and transformation. And the way I go about doing that is, ensuring a level of philosophical integrity, I call it. And so, making sure so that, in a feasible, I've worked with several organizations through sort of startup phases or founder transitions. And so, how do you go about doing that change with, aligned with your values? Attached to principles and connected to the community and the stakeholders or the beneficiaries of the work. So for here, I'm new into the health world and to the work of BC Family Doctors, but I really see, our primary care system in BC is under so much stress, and um, I guess my goal for working with these family doctors is to see where we can use the advocacy voice that we have, but also the nimbleness of being a small team right now. I mean, yeah, to basically find ways to support family doctors thriving as they're sort of these nodal caregivers in a system of healthcare. And so many of them want to be able to evolve into, what we're calling team-based approaches to care, and different ways of breaking down the silos between hospitals and centers and the different types of work that doctors do. But again, it's sort of like it's being able to ask the questions like, what's getting in the way? And can we just try this here? So it's very close. It's very close to the social, the impact space and the thing, because I think a lot of it comes from just asking that question, you know, how about we just try this over here? So I mean, at this point, goals, I feel like I'm just in. So I feel like I have more listening and learning to do. Um, but always for me, a goal is, starting with that humility of one, asking for help, admitting what you don't know, and just like trusting that there's humanness on the other side of a big organization. And so when you make those connections and ask the questions, and are open to learning, you can move a lot.
Indeed, move mountains. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. I really appreciate you. Yeah. So my last question, do you have any closing thoughts or calls to action for our listeners and our viewers?
I think the biggest skill, and we were talking before we started about just sort of the young adults and kids in our lives as they go off. I think as a parent, but as a professional, as a change maker, and as someone who just cares deeply about the people and the places, the biggest gift that we can give ourselves is, and our kids is, actively working on our abilities, our capabilities to be discerning critical thinkers. I was at one of the speakers at the conference I was at was just talking about how misinformation is one of the greatest risks, the greatest threats of, out there right now. So but I see this everywhere. The power of discernment to ask and to slow down and sometimes say, I need more time, or we as a team need more time before making a decision or taking action. I'm reminded on the news again. I was in the food security world and also food waste world for a while, and while I was in that space, I kept thinking back to the decisions that got made around recycling and waste management back in the 90s, like even the 80s, 90s. And at some point, there was, most places in Canada, a very solid decision made to put a lot of energy and resources into recycling. And across Canada, we've ebbed and flowed. We've become very good recyclers for the most part. We've developed like incredible infrastructure and systems. But now we know that recycling is not getting it done. And it's actually caused many other unintended consequences. And I just keep thinking, I said, what if we had slowed down and said, what's the radical change that we can make to, the industry of like the retail industry and the grocery store industry around packaging, how we do consumerism? It could have just been a game changer, but because we put all of our eggs in the recycling basket and we thought, okay, we're getting it done, we're getting it done. So I'd say find the examples from history too, where we made a decision thinking it was a great decision, and now we're in a bit more of a conundrum, and go back and said, what are we not seeing now that's akin to what we weren't seeing then? That, like, let's take the time. So yeah, I don't know. I don't have an answer to the recycling issue, but I come back to it as a way of resisting my thinking, and maybe don't act. Just let's get some more information here. And so it's not around inaction, but it's around.
Thank you. My wife and I have 4 children, as you know, we were talking before. And one of
Yeah.
the three critical things we've always tried to share with them is obviously critical thinking, problem solving, and most importantly, imagination. And I thought
Yeah.
about that right as you were talking about that recycling kind of
Yes.
conundrum that is like, imagine if we had imagination in the process of the critical thinking
Mhm.
and the problem solving to be able to think past that, once again, that trigger, the problem solution, which is like just such a cycle. So
Yeah.
yeah, I really appreciate just the deep introspection that it seems like you bring to every conversation. And I feel like that being just a part of the call to action, like that folks need to slow down and use that level of discernment to really think, okay, you know what? I need some more time to either answer this question or try and resolve this problem, as opposed to that fight or flight mode consistently, which is kind of what we're taught in school, to be honest, in most institutions and colonial
Yes.
constructs, so
Yeah. Yeah.
again, yeah, I just really appreciate your visionary leadership, deep introspection, and remarkable authenticity that she brought to this conversation
Oh,
and to our community of practice. And as always at Setsi, we close this conversation the way it began, by giving thanks to the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We give thanks to all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We give thanks to all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Alexa, thank you so much for all that you do for so many.
thank
We
you,
appreciate
Victor.
you.
Thank you so much for having me.